YouTube, like right now. And I don't have my headset on. Hello, God bless, and welcome. I'm Kevin Haggerty. This is the Godlogic Project, where we discuss maintaining a Christian worldview in a post-Christian America. Exactly what we're going to do tonight with my guest, Jack Martin, who is on the front lines of a battle between parents, a network of parents, and the Pasco County School Board over some LGBTQ decisions and inclusion and those types of topics. So it's going to be an interesting conversation, a hard conversation to have, but I think it's going to be an important one. So I encourage you to tune in, share this with your friends. We will open up the phone lines later in the show, and you can, of course, message us on YouTube. If you're watching us over there on Facebook, go over to youtube.com/Godlogic Project, and you get the full multi-camera, full effect of the Godlogic Project over on YouTube. But we are streaming live to the Godlogic Project on Facebook right now. If there's anything I can do for you, I'll do this early. Email me, godlogicproject@gmail.com. If you need help in any way, if I have the resources to help you with recovery or any kind of addiction, even theological questions, doctrinal questions, feel free to email me, godlogicproject@gmail.com. We now have an Amazon affiliate. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Next day is Black Friday. When you do your Amazon shopping this holiday season, if you would, please go to godlogicproject.com, click on the Amazon logo, shop as usual, but Amazon will then donate a portion of your purchases to the Godlogic Project, help pay for some of this stuff, which I'm going to have to begin to start ramping up here a little bit. But first, how about we listen to the intro music? Hello, God bless, and welcome. I'm Kevin Haggerty, and this is the Godlogic Project.
Shut up, Kevin.
That's right. I'm Kevin Haggerty. That's Mike Easton telling me to shut up like he does every week. And in studio today, I have Jack Martin. Jack, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great, brother.
So you and I have never met till tonight, although we did talk an awful lot via Facebook and also on the phone. But you are involved in kind of an ongoing dispute with the Pasco County School Board right now over LGBTQ rights compared to parents' rights, and which is a particular concern to me, plus the rights of kids that don't struggle with gender identity. How did you get involved in that? How long have you been doing that? Tell us a little bit of your background.
Since September of 2018, and I had a friend call and ask me if I was aware of what was going on. I wasn't, so I showed up at I believe it was the September, if not the October, board meeting and heard what they were saying. I realized that they were excluding parents from having any say in what their policies were. They were forcing people to accept something against, any belief they might have themselves.
So it wasn't that they were not honoring the input of the parents, but they were kind of subverting the input of the parents. They were avoiding it altogether by having LGBTQ clubs after school, but being willing and encouraging to do it anonymously, that a parent, I have kids in the Pasco County school system, that if I asked if my child was going to that club, they would protect the anonymity of the child. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I think one of the things that stuck out to me was an email I read by the school psychologist, Jackie Jackson Dean, where basically she told the person she was writing to, if the child comes to you and tells you they're feeling gender dysphoric, don't tell the parent. And then in another case, one of the parents, Gloria Ann Kirk, had asked to have permission slips sent home. And they made it like it was some ridiculous thing. When if you go to like Orlando County over that way, where Orlando is, you'll find out that they use a parent slip, and yet they were saying it was too difficult here.
Right. So what would their concern be? Oh, we just lost our cameras. What would their concern be for including parents, that it would somehow put the children in jeopardy, or what is their argument for that?
It was superficial. They were saying basically that a child's life would be at risk if that happened. And I asked them at one meeting, said, can you give me statistics on any situation where a parent has, physically or even, mentally harmed their child over it? And they couldn't. They said, but it exists, and we can't take the chance. That to me seemed like it was a cop-out to go the route they were going.
Right. So it would then seem, and there's probably a percentage of parents that would not receive that information or knowledge of that their child was struggling with gender identity. It may not be received well. My concern would be, and what little I've known about this in the last year, less than a year probably, is that that's not the place of the school board to make that decision. And my worry is always with government that they are trying to play the role of the parent and disqualifying the parental authority, God-given parental authority over these kids, so that they can then circumvent that authority, which is very appealing to a middle school or a high school kid. When they circumvent the authority of the parent, all of a sudden that is very liberating and very freeing and very inviting to a child who then might want to that might be part of their motivation to plug into this type of thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
So the big concern, I think, is in the LGBTQ community. I'm talking the T part of it is that the suicide rate is super high pre-transition, something like 44%. I've seen some studies, but it does not seem to get any lower post-transition.
Actually, if you do a lot of research on it, what you'll find is if you take your statistics from an LGBTQ familiar site, they'll give you the higher statistic there. If you really check it out, and check it out even with people who have transitioned and detransitioned, you'll find out the rate of suicide is higher after a person has transitioned and realized that wasn't the fulfilling need in their life.
Yeah, so that would now, LGBTQ is lesbian, bi, gay, trans, and Q is queer or questioning, or something like that.
Yes.
So they cover a broad spectrum of topics here for these kids. So it's not just same-sex attraction, but it is literally kids that are dealing with am I a man or a woman? Am I a male or a female? At a very vulnerable time in their lives, they are being influenced. I think my concern would be they're being influenced by only one side of the argument, right? And so then we end up with a situation where what's in the best interest of these kids? And are all parents such a threat that they would warrant not telling the parents? I find that very, very hard to believe. I don't know a parent like that.
Yeah, it's not realistic to think that way. If you follow through other statistics that have come out, 99%, 88%, or 99% of the men, 88% of the women who go through this in their pre-puberty years, by the time they've gone through puberty, have returned to accepting their true gender. And I have a grandson that's 3 years old, and one day he's going to be a fireman, and one day he's going to be a garbage man, and one day he's going to be an airplane pilot. The frontal lobe of the brain doesn't fully form until around age 24, 25. And so you're really taking them at a stage where they're not capable of making that kind of decision, and you're making it for them.
Right. So then there was a fight, I think, in Texas with a mother who is a doctor of some sort.
Yeah.
And she wanted to transition her 8-year-old son she was raising the boy as a girl. The father, who they were not married anymore, but the father fought to avoid hormone treatments for an 8-year-old boy. It just seems to me that if this conversation is so important that it has to be had in the light, right? And that if this conversation is not had in the light, in other words, if the Pasco County School Board particularly doesn't receive input from both the parents, the biological parents, and the state parent, the state nanny that they're trying to be, it seems to me if I had to trust one, I would trust the parents. And the other thing is, if we can't trust every parent to make a healthy decision for their kid, then we need to balance the power between the state and the biological parents. Does that make sense?
It does. I just get concerned when the state moves away from reading, writing, and arithmetic to ideology, because it then becomes their view, my way or the highway. And I think what I've learned a lot through the whole Pasco situation is when I checked email trails, other emails that I had received, there seems to be a network through all the schools of those who support this. And there's almost like a clandestine type style where they're conferring with each other on how to push these issues along. One of the things that Jackie Jackson Dean had put up was a statement that said, if a door closes, find an open window. And basically the statement was, if you get blocked, keep looking for a crack in the wall.
Right. So is the entire Pasco, is there 9 people on the Pasco County School Board? How many school?
Five board members, a lawyer, and a superintendent.
Okay. And then are they all pro keeping the parents out of this conversation, or is there some division? They're elected officials? They were voted into those positions, right?
Reading their faces, I would say that there's a division. I think what happens almost at the end of every meeting, the lawyer comes out with a scary tale.
Yeah.
And he tells them this is what will happen. This is what will happen. The Liberty Council had offered to serve them pro bono if anything came up, but the school board pushed that to the side.
Well, what would be an example of what might happen? What would the lawyer say might happen?
He goes immediately to a case in St. John's where the school board did not go any further in the lawsuit because they didn't want to invest money if they lost, and so they simply reneged on it. There was never a decision reached on the merit, and he keeps telling them, well, look, they stopped them there. When I bring up things like Marion County, where in April 2016, they passed a policy that left a single-use bathroom, they've never had a lawsuit. They've never had a problem.
Right.
But even in the meeting that night, back in 2016, every person that spoke on the opposite side said, you're going to get sued, Title IX, this and that. None of it was accurate.
So then the statewide, it's an issue. Nationally, certainly it's an issue. There's a big debate. You mentioned Title IX, but there's big debates going on with whether transgender men should be competing with biological women in sports. Obviously, regardless of what of their emotional state or their mental state, they're bigger, stronger, and faster. So while that was a push that seemed to be accepted even by the U.S. Olympic Committee. They've kind of, at least the U.S. Olympic Committee has kind of backed off it a little bit. I saw, was it New Zealand or somewhere voted, basically decided not to allow men to compete with women.
I know a weightlifting group. I don't know about the Olympics. I know one of the weightlifting groups have determined they can't compete that way.
Yeah, it's just not fair. And so the argument that there is more than one gender is an emotional argument. And even if their hearts are in the right place while they're making that argument, the science doesn't support it. So it's not a social construct, but it's a chromosome thing, right? So men are generally bigger, stronger, thicker boned, faster, can run longer, taller, almost everything that would make a difference in a sporting event. So it worries me that does not make sense to everyone. So when I see people argue that gender is a social construct and not biological, that's almost inexplicable to me. And I'm not I don't have a PhD, but I can tell you that, there's difference between men and women, certainly. So then, so we take the point of Pasco County. If we focus simply on Pasco County, there was a teacher that was commissioned to, and we'll show his video here in a minute, but he was commissioned to monitor a boys' locker room while a girl that identified as a boy showered with the boys right here in Pasco County. What school? Are you comfortable saying what school that was?
It was Chasco Middle, and the teacher was Robert Petersano.
And he refused to basically stay in the locker room and watch the kids change. Basically, is that how it went?
Yes, he and another teacher. I'm trying to remember her name. Her last name is Christensen. I forget her first name, but she was part of that too. And they both Stephanie is her first name, and they both chose to not do it by their beliefs, by the moral beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, and I would be uncomfortable. I would be uncomfortable with a teacher that didn't say no to that. That is, wants to go watch my 13-year-old daughter undress. That's a bit tough for me as a parent of both a boy and a young girl.
Any other period of time, he'd be called a pedophile.
Yeah, and so I would not want him in there. I admire the fact that he didn't, and I would be alarmed with, I'll watch them shower or whatever. That would be a red flag, right? So they would certainly. Like you said, and not very long ago, they would have not made, that wouldn't even have been an issue. So this thing is coming very quickly, fast and furious. My fear as a Christian and as a pastor is that it's not just, they make the argument that they just want to be left alone, but then they make a defensive argument, and then when it suits them, they make an offensive argument.
Exactly.
So we get to Beto O'Rourke saying that churches that won't do same-sex marriages will lose their 501(c) or whatever it is. That would put most churches in America out of business because we don't generate enough money beyond corporate donations where they really want that tax deduction. So that is, I think, where there's hills in life that we die on, hills we don't die on. But there's got to be a balance in there somewhere. And this is my worry about having really just not Christians or conservatives not having a seat at the table at all. That there is, if you have this one-sided conversation, I think we see it in all aspects of life now. We tend to exist in intellectual bubbles. People that love Trump tend to only talk to people that love Trump. People that loved Hillary or socialism or any of the things that the Democrats are going for now tend to only spend time and think and agree with and get people to agree with them. So my advice would be beware of any doctrine, any idea, any ideology that flourishes in the darkness, but then withers in the light. So if the Green New Deal is a perfect example, there was probably hundreds of people telling AOC that was a great idea, powerful, brave, all those things. And then the rest of the world reads it, and we're like,
it bankrupts us.
Yeah, no cows, no airplanes, and if they're not willing to work, they should still be paid. That does not play well outside of that intellectual bubble, right? So this is what worries me, is that if Christians just talk to Christians and the left-wing guys, the leftists, just talk to leftists, things make perfect sense. But it's when we have a seat at the table with each other and we try to talk about these things, we need to be able to do it logically and not emotionally.
Yeah, that's key.
So this little girl wanted to shower, or identified as a boy, and she was 13. How old was she? Is this middle school or high school?
I believe it was 13.
Okay. So she identified as a boy and wanted to shower with the boys. And then the boys were not happy with that, from what I saw from the video, and we'll play the video. And then the teacher was fired or reprimanded. What happened to the teacher?
Reprimanded. In the video, you'll see Hill statements were made. They're talking about, are you comfortable with putting him out? His ways can't be tolerated. And what ways were his ways? His ways were his Christian beliefs.
Yeah.
What their argument a lot of times in the midst of that is, well, no girl ever undressed in front of a boy or showered. The problem was that the condition existed in which she could. And so to say it didn't happen then and there is an invalid argument.
So the school board outwardly is saying what? That they understand his position, but inwardly their internal emails to each other that he talks about a little bit, they're saying we gotta shut this guy down, we gotta keep him from speaking, or because it seems like there's two very different stories being told here, for sure.
No, and actually in the meeting that the superintendent and the chairman of the board had, and the chairman of the board had with a few of us, he actually had made the statement that Rob had broken the rules and he could have fired him. He stated he never would, but he made it plain that he saw Rob's behavior as unacceptable. Right,
and these are the things that worry me. So we have a video now, and we're going to show it to the audience here. And this is Rob, the guy we're talking about, addressing the school board at a public hearing.
At the very last school board meeting in November.
This is the one I missed last week.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I went to attend one. I attended one of the earlier ones, prepared to give a 3-minute talk, and place was packed, and they literally, it wasn't on the agenda. It was there. They have some open time at the end that you can talk about it. Just the fact that these things aren't on the agenda.
They won't put it on the agenda.
Yeah, and that is my worry is that all parents should know this is going on, and not just parents that are like-minded with the same ideology that the Progressive School Board has, but all parents should know that this is going on, and kind of why I have you on here. I had Gloriana Kirk from Protect Pasco's Children on here a couple months ago, and I actually had a school board, a school teacher, like a 20 or 30-year veteran school teacher, call in, and she was telling me anonymously that they were compelled to follow that the teachers, by and large, are worried about this and don't agree with this, but they can't talk back, they can't speak out about it, and they have to follow the guidance of the school board, which is again, it's very authoritarian, right? So if they have a fair argument, why are they not willing to make the argument publicly? Why does it have to be private, closed-door conversations, and we're going to do it anyway, and we're going to just make sure that the parents that may resist this don't know about it? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why this is a terrible idea. Let's play this video. I accidentally started playing already, and we'll talk. We may pause it and talk about it a little bit as we go. Is it playing? There it is.
There we go.
Okay, my name is Ronald Pitasano, 15120 Teresa Boulevard. I'm here to clear up some of the misleading information that continues to be put out by the district office. Hopefully, after today, these false reports will come to an end. The situation began over a year ago when I was informed that a girl identifying as a boy would have full access to the boys' locker room, including showers. After I refused to supervise a co-ed locker room, I was required to meet with Thomas Neesham, who was an attorney that works for the district. During that meeting, Mr. Neesham told me that I could lose my job and teaching certificate. He asked me directly, "Are you willing to lose your job over this?" After feeling my job was threatened, I had no other choice but to search out legal representation. Thankfully, Liberty Counsel provided me with the legal assistance necessary to retain my job. While the district likes to say my job was never threatened, I ask you to look at the emails. You'll see something totally different. Statements like, "Shall we put him out today?" Or another one that says, "This will send a clear message. We will not tolerate his behavior," or just a few that have been said. One of the questions that has been yet to be answered is, what was the issue with my behavior? I asked for an accommodation that would keep me from supervising a locker room that's now being co-ed, and I want the parents to be contacted. This was to protect my religious beliefs and the safety of all of our kids. I wanted to deal with no part of the co-ed locker room. As I stated at a prior meeting, no teenage girl needs to be taken off her clothes in front or shower in front of these young boys or a grown man. I have to wonder how many other teachers are facing similar problems or are being silenced by the threats coming out of this district office. Statements are on record with officials saying, "Well, these things never happen." Even though my colleague and I were the only two adults present in the gym when these half-dressed boys came running out of the locker room looking for help. The female student that day walked into the boys' locker room before any other adults had arrived. There was nobody in the locker room to assist these boys. If we couldn't get this right on the first day, how are you going to be able to keep the kids safe on any other day? All I can say is that this district personnel continues to say that these things never happen, and this is not true. If we need to pull out the boy's name that was out here looking for help, we'll give it to you. It's time that our elected school board officials fix this failed policy and help our children, help keep our children safe and our parents informed. Thank you.
All right, so there we have a school board, a school teacher addressing the school board. Now, the school board, some of them seem legitimately interested in what he was saying. And I don't know any of them, by the way. I'm just going by what I see on the screen. But some of them did seem to be barely tolerating the things he was saying.
It's pretty normal at a meeting. The woman in the red jacket usually pays attention. There's another woman that you can't see right now who does. And the others basically kind of look around and look at things. Mr. Browning does sometimes, not all the time. And you get the feeling they're not really even hearing us.
Right, and they're going through the motions. Maybe they're just trying to get this over with. Now, at some point, is there any indication that they're going to put this on the agenda to be discussed, or are they convinced that the way they're going to do it is the way they're going to do it?
I've tried, and others have tried to get them to do a workshop on it. They've refused. So what I've done is I have approached Hernando County School Board, and know a couple of the board members here, and had them presented with an article for a policy that would make it a biological sex as a choice. And they're talking about possibly putting it on as a workshop. If they do, then I then hope to parlay that against Pasco to say, if they can do it, why can't you?
And they're not talking about kids that are same-sex attractant. They're talking about a young girl that feels like she's a boy. She identifies as a boy, and so she wants to live a boy life, and she's probably just now entering puberty, I guess, if she's in middle school or high school.
Yeah.
And so what worries me is this is probably the most vulnerable of our population right now. I was, when I was that age, very impressionable. I'm sure you were. Everybody is, from that 13 to 25-year-old range. Whichever way the wind blows, it tends to be how we behave. My worry is that if they make this so attractive, so inclusive, so accepting, so celebrated, that then becomes part of the lore for these kids. And you were saying that or what percentage of kids, I've heard as high as 90% of kids that struggle with gender identity during puberty eventually outgrow it. And it's somewhere between 80 and 95%.
90% with boys. I said 98 before. I was wrong. 90% with boys, 80% with girls.
Right. So what do you think the motivation is then to rush these kids? Why sexualize our kids at all at such an early age? Why rush them through? Do you think they're trying to be I think they're trying to be compassionate and do the right thing, but sometimes doing what feels good and doing what does good is two different things.
I think there's confusion here. I think there's a genuine effort to do away with a biological sex. And the only way you do that is by making it, invalid. And that seems to be, when you talk about the LGBTQ, agenda, you're talking about people who are putting ideas forth for a purpose. We're not talking about the individual who's gender dysphoric. Mm-hmm. My heart and soul goes out to them to help them, but there's an actual effort to do away with. And I, as a pastor, as a Christian, I look at that as, if I read Genesis, I read God created a male and female in His image, mm-hmm. and the best way to spit in God's face is to take that away. And it seems to me that is somewhere tied up in the package.
Yeah, and certainly I think there is a lot of that in a lot of the issues that we deal with in 2019. I think the theme of the Godlogic Project is that how to maintain a Christian worldview in a post-Christian America. With me, I try to do it with compassion and little self-discipline. I think the problem is when we get emotional and we start calling each other names, Then we can't have the conversation. It becomes very difficult then to have the conversation at all, and I think that's a big problem. So that we end up stuck in those intellectual bubbles where we're really kind of intellectually lazy because everybody agrees with us, right? So it becomes very easy to, if everybody's saying yes to you, then every idea seems like a great idea. If I throw my ideas at my minor children, they're not going to argue much because I'm daddy, right? Yeah. So, but then if I put that idea to you, you might be like, Kev, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. So how do we then have this conversation publicly in the light and come to, there's a logic and a reasoning that's available to us. If we even set aside Scripture, there are two genders, right? There is a binary, male, female. Now, there might be a spectrum that exists within the male gender and within the female gender, but there's no scientific proof, I don't think, that hermaphrodites maybe that you can cross from one to the other. Now, as an adult, you can do whatever you want, right? But this is a little bit different because they're talking about children, and they're not talking about their children. They're talking about our children. Yeah. And that we as parents and as Christians in America would not be able to speak into that. So one of the things I'm trying to set up is to have an LGBTQ, I guess, a forum in here. I have a lot of friends that are from that community. I'm going to have them in here, or friends or their friends or somebody, and I have a lot of questions. I want to pick apart a lot of that, and I want to try to get them to maybe explain to me, if they can do so calmly and rationally. A lot of what you see on TV and the news is so erratic and so crazy that it really is never going to get you anywhere, you know, especially now. The state of the media and everything else in the United States is very tough. So what I'm going to do, Jack, is I'm going to open up the phone lines if anybody wants to call in. I'll fiddle around a little bit. As you guys know, I'm both the engineer for the Godlogic Project and the host, so sometimes I get confused and forget what I'm doing. Try not to do that tonight. We're going to open the phones to you guys if you want to call in, if you have any input, anything you'd like to speak into this. As always, if you want to be a guest on the Godlogic Project, email me at godlogicproject@gmail.com. If we can work a show around you or around your cause, certainly glad to do it. It's godlogicproject@gmail.com. If you're interested in the content that we're talking about today, if you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. Either way, comment so I know. And if you would subscribe, we're trying to get our subscriber base up. It's how this whole YouTube process works. Only takes a second. Subscribe, ring the alert bell, and every time we put up new content, you'll be alerted, so they'll let you know. So we have, I'm going to kind of keep an ear out for when people call in, so I might interrupt you to get to the phone call.
No problem.
And it becomes a little bit awkward, but again, there's no engineer. It's just me with a bunch of stuff that I'm just now learning how to use. So what is the official policy, do you think, of the school board? Is there official policy to not include parents in these conversations, or do they say they do and they don't? How does that work? How are they getting away with this? Because this seems like North Korea stuff, authoritarian, not United States of America stuff. We should be able to have this open conversation.
Yeah, the way they're getting away with it is by not having a voted policy. They have this fluid practice that can change. They'll tell you, as they did in that last form put out by the school. Yeah. They'll tell you that it's a compilation of ideas that they're using, and that they can change with each individual case. You can't have that. I think in the Marion County, what their point of view was, they pointed back that years earlier a boy had been suspended for going in the girls' room. And they said that was a policy, and that policy never changed. Why is it now okay?
Yeah.
Well, we need to almost research that and see, well, what is the policy that's always existed? Because they're changing it by choice.
So are these things by county level, state level? Is the federal government saying they have to do this? How far up can they pass the buck before somebody has to be accountable for the decisions? Is that a Pasco County thing? Can we as Pasco County residents vote all these folks out and vote new folks in?
We can do that, and I've never advocated all of that, because I think sometimes that's that argument of, you don't agree with me.
Yeah.
I'll get rid of you.
So it would be nice to have a mix of folks on there.
It certainly would be nice to get our voices heard to where they actually gave a seminar on it. I think the best thing would be for our state legislators to make it that it was biological sex was the basis for bathroom and shower and locker room choices. On the federal level, under the Obama era, he had made an executive order where he said, according to Title IX, it now included transgenders. Well, Donald Trump became president, and they immediately overturned that. So on that basis, that doesn't hold anymore. And Title IX, the wording of Title IX, does not include transgender.
And that Title IX goes to equality for female athletes, basically, or female students altogether.
It's everybody. It's that nobody is mistreated because of their race, their gender. There should be no discrimination, but it doesn't include transgender.
Right. So it is. This is kind of a newer problem, a very unique problem, really. That there would be this would even be a conversation. So the idea that part of the problem is we look at it as one big group, right? So I have friends that are gay, and I have friends and family members that are lesbians and gay, and but they absolutely live a normal. They're not militant. They're not angry. They're just kind of how they feel about being kind of lumped together with the transgender community or folks that are
in a wrestling meet. There are girls who are losing scholarships because they should be number one in their state in fields, and they're losing. I saw a video the other day of I guess it's at hand volleyball, not volleyball, but soccer, where you run and throw it. It was a 260-pound boy who identified as a girl.
Yeah.
And I mean, basically, you could hurt somebody horribly that way.
And they're taking state and national titles away because they obviously could run the mile a lot quicker. They can obviously lift a lot more weight. And I don't say that to be provocative, but it's obvious that will happen. So while there are women, and I know women that are stronger than me, that is the anomaly. That is the fringe. But by and large, statistically, men are going to be considerably stronger, faster, taller, more athletic, and more inclined to probably the mechanics of athleticism as opposed to women. Yeah. So it becomes then, and I wonder what role our education system has been playing in this for decades now, because this makes an awful lot of sense to an awful lot of people who I admire and love, but I can't understand their logic behind this, right? And it is, I'm sure it's to some degree they're trying to be kind and inclusive, and I would promote that and I would defend that. But at some point, there is a lack of reason or logic that goes to that side of the argument from otherwise logical, reasonable people.
Yes.
So where does that is that a spiritual issue? Is that particularly an anti-Christian issue? I'd love to have this conversation with people outside of you and I are pretty close to like-minded on this issue. Certainly, as parents, I can't imagine there'd be a ton of parents out there that would say, "Well, let the government raise my kids. That's fine. I'll let them decide." I've always, with my kids, I'll teach them right from wrong. You teach them the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, and I'll worry about teaching them about right and wrong. That does not seem to be unreasonable, but it is. We've almost moved to kind of the nanny state mentality, where the state,
the NEA, is big behind all of this.
Yeah, and the teachers union is my theory on why our education system, and this is not a popular theory, especially amongst a lot of family and friends I have in the educational community, but I think the drive for smaller classrooms hasn't worked. I think it's the motive behind those smaller classrooms was a larger teachers union, a more powerful teachers union. The more teachers they have, the more powerful that union is. And we've seen almost a watering down of the talent pool in the teaching community. And we're seeing a lot more of teacher-student sexual relationships and things like this, because they perhaps are lowering the standard to include more kids. And when I was a kid, and I had nuns for the most part and Christian brothers, but there was 48, 50 kids in our class, and everybody did fine. And all of a sudden, 18 is too many, and we needed a teacher and a teacher's assistant. That seems to me to be more politically motivated than teaching motivated. So there seems to be something to that's very disturbing. But there's a lot of things about our educational system I find very disturbing. It seems to me the guys that exercise the least amount of logic in these conversations have the highest degrees. Yeah. And so they speak from a position of authority, because I'm a PhD or a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. But that if what you were taught is wrong, is illogical, it's very hard to make a logical argument about it, right, or against. So there seems to be, my worry is that we are teaching kids in college, that we're teaching them what to think. We're not really teaching them how to think anymore, and we're paying a price for that globally with our ability to perform on an intellectual level globally. I mean, we're the United States. We should be in the top 3, right? And we struggle to be somewhere in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, we're quite a bit ways down.
Yeah, so I think that is a failure of the education system, and there was such a huge drive for everybody should go to college. That's how you better yourself, and I think everybody should go to college, but not every degree is created equal. Yeah, we've lent student loan money, we've lent federal money out to these kids for degrees that they're never going to be able to use hardly. Now, having a music degree is wonderful, but you don't really make a living except as a music teacher with a music degree. Gender studies, you name it, 15th century French poetry. It's going to be hard to get a job in that 15th century French poetry field when you get out of college. Exactly. So they should have probably, and this is 2020 hindsight, but they should have been more careful who and how they lent that money out in the first place. And then the STEM science and technology, all the sciences we're kind of falling way behind in, and a lot of our kids are being attracted to more of the liberal arts. That too, I think, is something that there is a motivation behind that we're trying to liberalize our youth. We're trying in America. You see it in the debates right now, in the Democratic debates. We're trying to be like Europe. Yeah. Well, why would we want to be like Europe? I mean, by a global standard, we're kind of in a better shape than Europe, right? We have the world's largest economy. We're America. We've contributed more to the globe than anybody, any country. And why would we now want to be like somebody else? That is a strange mindset, but it's very prevalent in people that have, 4, 6, and 8-year degrees. It's crazy. So we're going to show a video now of a lady that I'm guessing this isn't the United States because she has what appears to be a British accent. But she is talking about the importance of the LGBTQ being taught in the classroom. Now, there's 2 things to point out here. A, they're teaching it in the classroom, which worries me. So they wouldn't teach pro-life in the classroom, but they'll teach this in the classroom. Then the other thing that would worry me is, what I would admire about this is at least they're doing it openly.
Yeah.
Right. So they're not doing it after school and your parents can't know where you are type of thing. But let's show this lady, if I can do it without screwing it up again. And then we'll take your calls after the video if anybody would like to call in.
We are a charity that transforms schools and organisations. We are a charity that transforms schools and organisations into LGBT-friendly places. So predominantly, we are training teachers because we want our teachers to be really, really confident in the language of gender identity and sexual orientation. And really, the bottom line is to completely smash heteronormativity. That's what we want to do. So our kids can grow up and be who they are. We totally encourage intersectional ways of teaching, lots of pedagogies around usualising, so making LGBT+ an everyday occurrence within the school.
In our school, every lesson is somehow linked to diversity. It used to be the odd lesson where we talked about diversity, but now it never stops.
Hi everyone, my name is Steph. I'm here for Educate and Celebrate and Queer My Library.
We ask our students and our teachers to mark key LGBT dates on the calendar. One of our busiest times is February, LGBT History Month, where we engage our students, our teachers, parents, governors and the local authorities in whole school change.
We've been looking at LGBT all week. We've had singers, we've had dancers, we've had drama, we've had teachers that have come out to standing ovations, we've had kids that have come out. It's just been incredible, the best week ever.
We've got a rainbow week, we've got guest speakers, we've got a mini pride march happening in the school.
Has to tell you what to be.
And really, the bottom line is to completely smash heteronormativity. That's what we want to do.
All right, we see a couple things in that video that I find disturbing is that they're trying to crush heteronormity, which is to say that they're trying to crush the idea that heterosexual men and women, which is biologically what we're supposed to be doing, that they should crush that idea, which goes a little bit too far for me. So if we're going to teach kids, and I think some of those kids are, I believe some of those kids are way too young to be having this conversation in the first place, and there should be a balance of that conversation. They should be getting both sides of that conversation. They're certainly not getting it in movies. They're certainly not getting it in television. But then the other thing is, one little kid there said something to the effect of, "You don't have to be what your parents tell you to be."
Very scary.
Yeah, and that is wildly inappropriate to teach a kid that type of thinking, and certainly it again circumvents the parents' rights. But the parent society doesn't make you a male or a female. While there are some anomalies within the two genders, certainly it's not a social construct. Study after study after study shows that men behave mostly like men and women behave mostly like women. Now, within those two genders, there is a spectrum of some men are more masculine than others, and some women are more masculine than others, or more feminine. But it is this is what I'm talking about. These are presumably educated, smart people. But what they're saying doesn't make any sense, or it's illogical, right? Or it just dismisses science in this case so that they can make a social argument. And should our school board be pushing any kind of social agenda? That's what I would wonder.
I think
about.
something that goes along with that, with a little boy saying that, when we're at these school board meetings, when we attempt to speak in favor of a single bathroom use or so. We are called by anybody there that represents the LGBTQ community homophobes, haters, bigots, and in my mind, I'm like, you know nothing about me. I have a son who's living the homosexual lifestyle. I love that son as much as I love my other 5 children. I would step in front of a bullet for them. But their group is kind of a my way or the highway. When they talked about getting rid of heterosexuality, that's the goal, is to completely wipe that out as a norm. And you'd have to wipe out reality to do that.
Yeah, and so then it doesn't become, or when do they cross the line between simply doing what they think is right and then doing what seems to be evil? I mean, seems to be wrong. Yeah. So I think it's Dennis Prager, I don't know, somebody talks about the difference between doing what feels good and doing what does good. And the analogy I use when I teach a lot of times is that if a teacher gives a math test to 20 students and she gives every one of the 20 students an A, she feels good because their whole class got an A. The kids feel good because the whole class got an A. All those parents and family members are thrilled because their kid got an A. And so they've done something that makes a lot of people feel good. It feels good, but they haven't done any good. In other words, because what they don't know is, and they could have done some harm, because we don't know which of those 20 kids deserved a D or an F and need help, right? And need a little extra school, extra focus on a single topic to get them into the C, B, and A range. So not only while they've done something that feels good, they've not only have they not done good, but they might have done some damage to some of those kids that may need help in some topics in math. So the idea that our feelings should circumvent everything is so relative and so fluid that there's no standard by which you can measure it by. It's just ridiculous.
I wish I could remember the gentleman's name, but he was for 40 years on the staff at Johns Hopkins University. For 20 of those years, he was chairman of the department that did
and it was pioneered at Johns Hopkins, and he was the guy that pioneered it.
He pioneered it, and he later came back to say, my research shows it does far more damage than it does good. Now, today, he's demonized. Sure. But back when he first said it, he was a hero.
Well, Martina Navratilova was a hero of women's rights and women's liberation when I was a kid, and now she's anathema, right? Now she's I would love to speak to a true feminists and discuss with them how they feel about the LGBTQ push and how it does seem to infringe on women's rights. Do the women that train hard and eat the right food and practice and want to run a quicker mile or lift a little more weight or win a soccer game, do their rights are their rights being quashed by the rights of somebody that is a man biologically that just identifies emotionally and psychologically as a woman?
And
who's standing up for their rights?
Right. I wondered a while back when Bruce Jenner was named the Woman of the Year, how does any woman who's really done what deserved that title feel when she knows that a man has won the Woman of the Year? Where are the feminists on this issue?
Yeah, I would love to get, I'm not sure I know women that love the girl power thing, but I don't know that I know true feminists. So if you consider yourself a true feminist, I'd love to have you in on this conversation. We could build a podcast around it. Email me at godlogicproject@gmail.com. Like I said, I'm going to try to have the LGBTQ side of things in here. Sure. I have a lot of questions for them as well. I wonder that how somebody that is just gay or lesbian or gay, how they feel about their cause, their movement being associated with the rest of it, every other letter that they add on to that, because it seems almost unfair to folks that are just living normal lives beyond their sexuality. So 10 years ago, you'd be likely to hear keep it in the bedroom. I think now you're more likely to hear keep it in the church house. And we saw a Democratic candidate for president pretty much say he'll go after churches that don't agree with this. And that's going way too far in America.
And you hear in the black community resistance when it's compared to what Martin Luther King did.
Yeah.
Because they're worlds apart. And it's like trying to gravitate to something that other people have good feelings about to push an issue that doesn't make sense.
And the African American community is probably, possibly unfairly accused of being exceptionally homophobic. when they may be certainly being just a defensive of their civil rights movement, and that was America not a perfect place. Certainly, we have our history
Sure.
of black eyes
Exactly.
since our founding, but we are the greatest country on earth for sure, and the best system that has existed this long. We're the only country that's been under the same Constitution for 243 years. And a lot of people would say, well, it's time to change the Constitution. But I say it's worked this far. It's gotten us this far. It might be time to change the Constitution if we were 43rd in the world in gross domestic product, but we're number one, right? We're number one in in education, we've always been number one in producing colleges and institutions.
And we're the nation that people are trying to break into.
Yeah, and people are trying to sneak in here. Nobody's
Sure.
ever trying to sneak out of here. There's something very, very different about the United States. But we live in a society in the last 11 years or so that America is essentially evil and needs to be fixed, fundamentally changed.
That's been taught in the schools. That's been propagated in the schools.
Again, it has to be, because why would otherwise rational, intelligent people all be coming to the same irrational, unintelligent conclusion about these things, right? So my friends that I love and respect say America's history is built on slavery. America has slavery in their history, but certainly the things we've done in this country in the last 243 years were not all due to slavery, right?
Oh, and if you think that through, in the history of the world, there's only one nation I know of who fought a war among Caucasians to bring to an end slavery. 600,000 people died in the Civil War. We saw the wrong in it, and we brought it to an end. No other nation did that.
And we were willing to fight and die for that. And so, here's my point, and this is not a threat, but a reality check, that there are hills that we will die on as Christians. There will be hills we will be forced to choose whether we die on them or not. And so I would not underestimate. We can see it in how Trump got elected. It wasn't Russia. Hillary wasn't a great candidate, granted, but there is a silent majority in the United States that doesn't speak up, that doesn't answer polls, or if they do, they're not going to expose themselves as conservatives for sure. But 63 million people voted for that guy for president. I was one of them, reluctantly, but I was one of them.
And when you watch the rallies, last night there were 31,000 people in the stadium, and there were people outside. Even if I held most extreme left view, I'd have to stop and say, why is it this guy draws crowds like that, and our candidates draw anywhere from 50 to 200, maybe 1,000 people? Yeah. There's a silent voice that's saying we want to be returned to the roots that the founding fathers gave us.
Yeah, and just be constitutionalists again. So there are, like I said, smart people that resist that, and I think instead of an education, they've received more of an indoctrination, and I believe they truly believe they're saying and doing the right things when they say and do the things they do. And it's just surprising to me that otherwise intelligent, articulate person thinks there's more than one gender, or thinks that guns kill people. The whole Second Amendment argument is silly, right? So we've had guns forever, but we have mass shootings the last 20 years, right? The AR, which does not stand for assault rifle, by the way, it's been out since like 1974 or something, right? We didn't automatically have mass shootings then. We have a spiritual issue in this country. We have a mental health issue for sure in this country. We have one broken home after another issue in this country.
And that was one of the other day there was an article that said all but a few of those who have been involved in the mass shootings came from a fatherless home.
Yeah.
There's clearly a moral brokenness in our nation.
So we wanted a godless society, and now we're seeing what it looks like. Yeah. And I hate to say it that way, but this is what a godless society looks like now. As for me and my home,
we'll serve the Lord.
Yeah, but that does not play well in the United States anymore, and that's a scary thing. And if we do not begin to have these conversations and stop being so emotional and stop calling each other names and really sit down and discuss these things, understand that you can't extend your rights sometimes without infringing on the rights of others.
Exactly.
So if a teenage boy wants to shower with the girls' basketball team, My 14-year-old daughter's in there. She has rights too,
Yeah.
right? And so we can't just infringe on the rights of the masses to appease something like 0.004% of the population. Strangely growing, and I think they're making it such an attractive movement that people want to be part of it.
And I don't have any problem with them having a single user restroom or shower area. That would seem to me for them to be the fairest. They're not with people they don't think they're gender like, but neither are they with people whose physical appearances aren't the same. So they change and they go to gym. What is the argument that how somehow that's unfair?
Yeah. So it's a tough situation. So we want to protect these kids. We want to nurture these kids. I'm not sure celebrating what's going on in their hearts is the answer. Like I said, I think it feels good, and there's that motivation, but are we helping them? So if somebody called me and said, I want you to talk to my daughter, she's anorexic or something like that, and how do we deal with this? And I told them, start telling her how wonderful obesity is and healthy and beautiful and obesity is. We haven't really solved the problem. We might make that child feel better and may even quell the anorexia, but she's not obese, right? And whether she feels like she is or she feels like she's a boy, she's not. Yeah. And so we need to really consider: are we helping these people or are we hurting them? And long term, God forbid we're hurting. That breaks my heart.
At one of the school board meetings, a transgender individual came up who said they were male who said they were female, and they talked about their license and registration and birth certificate, all said that. And I followed them. I said, with all due respect, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, I was chaplain with the fire department for 17 years. If we came into a place where a body was burned beyond recognition, they would do a DNA test. And the DNA would come back male if they were XY, female if they were XX, and it didn't matter if they were wearing a dress or work boots or whatever. Yeah. They would be what they really were.
Yeah, and what about their if they go into the hospital complaining of stomach cramps? That will be diagnosed very differently between a man and a woman.
Sure. And
that's not fair to the doctor who they've checked the male box, but he's really trying to diagnose a female. And the nurse brings him the vitals or whatever, and he says, all right, do this. There's some liability there. Exactly. He's got to be ready to understand that might, even though it says male, it might be a female still. And that's really tough stuff. So if we're gonna close up here in a minute, guys, I appreciate you always supporting the Godlogic Project. If you would subscribe, comment down below, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to be on the Godlogic Project, it's godlogicproject@gmail.com. I want you to be part of this conversation, whether you think we agree or not. I want you to be part of it. If there's anything I can do to help you guys with any issues in your lives, again, email me, godlogicproject@gmail.com. Subscribe to the channel. Oh, if you're going to shop on Amazon anyway, go to godlogicproject.com. Click on the Amazon logo, and then shop as normal. It costs you nothing, but you can passively help the Godlogic Project pay for some of the shows that we put on here. And I'm going to put the camera back on Jack one more time for some parting thoughts. I appreciate you guys. I love you. And Jack, if you're going to send somebody away with your elevator speech, the last 2 minutes, what do you think you'd tell them?
I simply would say that it's not about an issue of hating somebody or being unfair. It's about being rational in what science teaches. For years I heard that Christians didn't go by science. With abortion, they tried to say that, and then they came out with the ultrasounds that showed a baby alive. With this gender issue, if we work with these kids, I truly believe that the majority of them will return to the normal gender, and in doing so, we will have saved a child a life of problems. I've done a lot of research, Kev, and a lot of people have been done more harm by transitioning and then detransitioning. Now, if I could say one last thing for Kevin, you may not agree with anything I said today. That has nothing to do with it. But I would say Kevin's doing a great job here, and I would ask you to go to his YouTube page and subscribe. He needs help. He's a great guy. Do that for him.
I appreciate you saying that, Jack. And we're going to wrap it up tonight. We'll see you next week with another thrilling topic here on the Godlogic Project. If no one's told you they love you today, God loves you. So do I. Receive that. Be blessed, and we'll speak soon. Thank you. Thank you for supporting the Godlogic Project. And if no one's told you they love you today, God loves you.